Hey everyone, True Tom here. I was going to make a video explaining RK selection theory in depth. It was going to be fairly long, but I thought I would stop to answer the question of whether libertarians are K-selected or R-selected, as I don't think they are either of them. Yet I see plenty of libertarians who clearly don't behave in a K-selected manner, being highly promiscuous with little group loyalty, etc., parading themselves as K-selected individuals. So I thought I would try and clear things up. Now this video will assume you have a vague understanding of anonymous conservatives' thesis put forward in the evolutionary psychology behind politics. And if you don't know about this, I believe Stefan Molyneux has a series on it. I've never watched it myself, but I assume it's decent. But also if you want me to make a full explanation of it, then please leave a comment, as it's a lot of time and I want to make sure people actually care to hear about it. But anyway, let's talk about my problem with how libertarians understand RK selection theory. I have a lot of friends who think that RK selection theory is the be-all and end-all of political psychology, using it to pigeonhole everyone into either R or K, as if whenever they cross an individual, they quickly try and sort out whether they are an R or a K, and they believe then that they can predict a whole variety of things about them, even making great stretches to convince themselves people who can't be confidently placed in either the R or the K category are in fact one or the other. Furthermore, I think the mistake comes from a misunderstanding of what RK selection theory entails, such as not understanding that the theory isn't a one-size-fits-all method of pigeonholing species into R or K selected groups, but it is a way of characterizing specific elements of a given reproductive strategy. For instance, starting with R selection, what factors constitute this reproductive strategy? Well, diminished age at mortality, free resource availability, environmental instability, diminished population density, and the degree to which competitive stresses are absent within a species. And all of these are environmental pressures that favor an R-selected reproductive strategy. But to illustrate, these are R-selective stresses that usually lead to increasing reproductive rates, and this is usually countered by predation, as typically, a non-R-selected species is easily able to prey on the R-selected one through its increased population. However, if the increasing rate of reproduction is countered by a shortage of resources, then this will speak to a K-selected stress. This can include instances when complex predators are responsible for such shortages. So, these pressures may all differently affect a variety of specific factors of reproduction, such as brood size, mating strategy, or sex-specific parental investments. Hence, it is unwise to think of RK as two types of species rather than two reproductive strategies, despite some species being heavily populated by one or the other at a given time. And it is especially unwise to think in such absolutist terms about humans, as we are a species that is exposed to cycles that are constantly playing out. As resources become abundant, populations boom, only to be culled through competition as resources deplete, until additional resources again become highly available to the now smaller population, and so on. And then it follows that the individuals that can adapt to both excess and scarcity are optimal for environments that contain these alternating periods of both. So most of us sit on the spectrum, probably being slightly geared towards K, with only political ideologues being at the extreme ends. Now, of course, none of this invalidates RK selection theory. It's just that the theory loses explanatory power as you look at more specific cases. In the same way that in physics, F equals ma isn't invalidated when we add friction and wind resistance and other specifics to the situation. It just means that F equals ma must be expanded upon. But to get back to libertarianism and how it isn't sufficiently explained by either R or K. A key facet of RK selection theory is that it operates under the assumption that populations are fairly dense, and that the members of a R or K selected species are bumping into each other at a fairly regular basis. Thus, when they are no longer interacting frequently, the theory begins to break down, as if individuals are spread out, wandering vast areas without any question of competition crossing their mind. Both K and R strategies stop being optimal, and it's as if a third strategy begins to arise. Now, remembering that the greatest determinant of whether an environment selects for R or for K is the availability of resources, it can be possible for an environment to inhibit any level of scarce resources, yet have the idea of group-centric aggression be illogical to its inhabitants, as for instance, if there are few resources to support even wandering individuals or groups that rarely interact with others, fathers may evolve to flee from mothers after mating, as doing so will leave more food stocks for their offspring. Now, continuing the assumption that this population is the remnants of a K-selected species, it could be that the organisms are still competitive, aggressive, and territorial. The point is that just as populations become less dense, the traits of RK begin to undo themselves. A significant evolutionary strategy that may characterize the libertarian mindset is the possible scenario where a R-selected multiplying population spreads outwards into another environment where resource availability is otherwise the same. However, as they spread into this new environment and increase in numbers, they become subject to a new form of predation by a K-selected species in that area. And this means that a third strategy could be selected for, one in which the R's, say, flee into harsher environments that cull its population due to resource scarcity, although they're escaping their competition. This could be illustrated through an R-selected species climbing a valley wall away from a river where the environment is much harsher. Furthermore, such a psychology parallels with the libertarian desire to live free from the legal constraints imposed upon them by both the left and the right, as both of the left's and the right's demands are means to compete within a highly dense population. So perhaps the libertarian psychology is optimal not for R or K selected environments, but a near third category of low density population. As under such an environment where individuals infrequently run into each other or interact, it would seem absurd to legally restrain one another. It would seem illogical to organize coercive constraints on their actions, and similarly, it would not be desirable or preferable to constrain others, whether this be to avoid competition or to ensure the strength and cooperation of a group. Additionally, in a low interaction environment, there would be little motive to judge the lives of others harshly, whether it be their sexual endeavors or more relevant things like drug use. It also seems to correlate with the general desire of libertarians to like or appreciate low-density areas, such as the frontiers, the Wild West, and other periods where this strategy was optimum. And moreover, there was no overarching federal government, and the law was on the shoulders of neighbours and countrymen. Now, what also stems from a low population strategy, which is unfortunate for us modern libertarians, is such a strategy is a minority amongst humans, which may explain why it has always been seen by common folk as, although maybe naive, a rational and honest position that is at least an improvement upon whatever major party that individual in question disagrees with. Yet it is never able to gain enough support to gain real political ground. However, despite this, just like conservatism and liberalism, K and R, it is a strategy that seems to have been useful in the past. Now, this explanation also makes sense of the fact that the most libertarian state to ever cross the face of the planet has been America, as its formation was through British settlers moving to a very harsh environment from a much more comfortable one where resources were very scarce and the population was spread out and interacted very rarely. And the benefits of living in such a harsh environment was liberty, freedom, as having big overarching state structures was unnecessary, while competitive, aggressive individuals were no threat, unlike to an R-selected population, and so on. Additionally, it is easy to predict a similar scenario when we begin to colonize other planets, such as Mars for instance. Individuals can live free from state interference as there is no strategic incentive to regulate the lives of others beyond basic self-defense. However, the libertarian is doomed, as the free exchange of capital, goods and services and other manifestations of freedom create wealth, only to be followed by gluttony and the ability to reproduce more rapidly, and eventually to the emergence of an environment that situates R-selected pressures, and subsequently re-establishing the RK cycle. But furthermore, it seems that the libertarian is not sufficiently characterized by R or K. We don't act like rabbits or wolves, but a third organism, like that of a grizzly bear, as the grizzly rarely encounters others of its own kind because they are spread out across a vast environment, while having a hybridized desire to avoid conflicts. Yet, when it is necessary, it can brutalize its transgressors. As to both the libertarian and the grizzly, it is too costly to engage in competitions and conflicts that could be avoided, whether it be another grizzly bear or another pointless war in the Middle East. And moreover, the strategic advantage of this psychology is being able to preserve energy while not constantly being chased by others. This is also reflected by libertarians often being heavily armed, owning all their firearms that they can get, yet having this seemingly contradictory desire to be left alone. Another characteristic of the bear that is shared with the libertarian is the indifference towards groups. They don't outgroup individuals they see as undesirable, yet they don't collectivize to gang up upon others. This being because self-sufficiency is the top priority, and because of which monogamy may be preferable to the individual, as it is often the most effective way of acquiring scarce resources. Same with two-parent childbearing. However, for the reasons given, the libertarian mindset would be tolerable of those who don't adopt this strategy, as in this environment, loyalty to the group is illogical. So, nonetheless, I hope this was helpful for those who have trouble pigeonholing libertarians into either R or K, as I believe doing so is a fool's task, because not only do we adopt the characteristics of both, it seems a third strategy is a better encompassing characterization. So, thanks for watching everyone. If you liked this video, remember to like and subscribe. If you want to help me out, go hit me up on Patreon. Even $1 would mean the world to me. And the more of you do it, the more videos I can afford to make. And remember to follow me on Twitter, and thanks again. Laters.